All right. It looks like the red light is on. We are live. Another LinkedIn live conversation. And this one is going to be really special. I think the first time I met Frank Eliason, Frank, I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember the rock stars of
Yeah.
social
Oh,
security?
oh, quick shout out to Chris Brogan.
Yeah, Chris Brogan. It was, and he was like, remember he was dressed like he was a member of Public Enemy or something like that.
Well, I'm actually, it's really funny because you've seen me speak. I typically am highly engaged, but I'm actually quite introverted. And back then, I was not used to this weird attention. And literally, right after I got done speaking, Chris dressed like that actually escorted me out the building so I can at least have a few minutes to myself to get my self back together again. Because being introverted, you get your energy
Right.
that way, and it was quite a fascinating experience.
Well, especially if he's escorting you dressed as a member of the S1Ws.
Exactly.
Yeah. That was the first time I met you. It was me, you, Paul Greenberg, and my buddy Michael Thomas. And Radiant 6 put it together. And that was like the first time we had a chance to meet and talk. So,
Oh, what a great crowd that is. And Radiant 6, what a great company that was. And now with
yeah.
Salesforce, obviously.
Yep.
But,
Very
some
cool.
great people there.
All right. Now, of course, beyond that, you were the guy that really, to me, I think really introduced social to customer care when you're at Comcast.
Mhm.
And everybody remembers, well, with gray in their beard at least, that remembers the at Comcast Cares. And that was you. I mean, you started that whole thing off.
I did. It'll be 11 years first week of April.
Wow, 11 years.
Yeah.
We could do a thing on that actually. but you went from there, you went to city, you started your own firm, you've done independent consulting, and that's what you're doing now. But in addition to that, and the thing that I really guess we're going to talk about today is you also work at an Amazon fulfillment center.
I do. I started back late November at what they call EWR 8, which is Robbinsville, New Jersey. Which funny thing is, I used to have my house was literally around the corner. I used to be able to walk there.
Wow.
When they were building it. So now I drive back there for some ungodly reason. But yes, I started working there, and it really came down to health insurance. Health insurance, if you're independent, can be outrageously expensive, especially if you don't meet certain income thresholds. And so for me, for a family of four, and I always try to have a certain HMO style, was costing about $36,000 a year. It's at times when you're a consultant, you have times where you're making a lot of money, and then you have other times where you're like, please, something come up.
Yeah.
And I'll be the first to say I'm not the greatest sales guy going around. So there's times where,
Yeah.
and so I was sitting back going, I need to figure something out about this health insurance. And, the commercial came on the air about Amazon and hiring at their fulfillment centers. And they have a number in the area or whatever, as well as drivers, et cetera. And they're paying like $15 an hour plus, and you get benefits. I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe I'll try this for the holidays and see what I think. And that's what I wound up going in to do. We'll get more into that in a moment. But I start working nights there on weekends, so I could still do consulting during the week. But Friday night through Monday night, my 40 hours, I go to Amazon.
What was really interesting is as you're doing all that, and you did a lot of research before you actually stepped into that. Why don't you talk about kind of what you were looking for and why you were doing the research and how that helped you with your decision?
Well, actually, my research started years ago. So years ago, I used to live around the corner from the Robbinsville fulfillment center, and they were building it to 1.2 million square feet. Think about how big that is. It was the second largest in the world. I believe now it's the third. I think they opened a bigger one in Illinois, but I could be wrong and all that. Could still be built for all I know.
Hmm.
But that is a huge fulfillment center. And
Yeah.
so when that was being built, there was a lot of discussion about Amazon warehouses and some of the issues that have happened there over the years, and even some, people that may have died or heat strokes or whatever in Pennsylvania. And so, I researched that back then because people were talking about it and it was part of the conversation around town. Do we want to? Robbinsville is literally the center of New Jersey. It is also the center point between Philadelphia and New York.
Hmm.
And so, there's reasons to choose that place for a fulfillment center. And it's right, highway access is just amazing. And so, there was a lot of discussion about this. So I don't like taking people's word for things. I always research things. So I researched it back then. Then, this job thing comes up, and it wasn't something I was planning on. It was not, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to do this. It was literally a radio advertisement that they were having. Hey, we're hiring, and I actually guess they were giving $1,000 bonus if you worked through the holidays. I'm like, that's a month. Get an extra $1,000 for working a month. I could do that. But their benefits were my bigger driver. And so I researched then, and it happened so fast. Basically, I decided maybe it was a Tuesday. I forget the exact time. Like, I'd have to look at the days. But anyway, we'll say it was a Tuesday. I think by Thursday, I decided to go on over and fill out an application. And so I went over to fill out an application. And it was quite an interesting process. I walk in, there's a room full of people, and maybe one or two of them were actually Amazon employees. These were all people applying. This is interesting. Basically, finally, I got up to someone and said, "What do I do?" And they pointed me to this computer. Fill out an application. Okay, so I typed in my application. Took all of about 5 minutes or less. And at the end of it, it gives you a little game. And actually, at the end of that, it says you're hired.
Wow, really? So you go and play a little game and you get hired.
and like, this was like 5 minutes, but basically you had to go through a drug test and you had to have some type of orientation thing, which I'm still not quite certain about because I don't think I quite got. But anyway, that time wasn't really that useful. I had to go pick up my kids. So it said, "What time would you like?" And I said, okay. They had a time at 7 o'clock that night. Okay, I'll be back at 7. So I came back at 7, walked in, said, okay, who I am. They just escorted me back to put some stick under my tongue for like ever. And that was the drug test. First time I had a drug test like that, but okay. Then I get sent back to sit in this other spot where I thought I was waiting to get a tour. There was some video playing that was kind of a little bit about what they do. It was on a loop, so you saw it about 20 times, and it's kind of like, it's ridiculous. Then someone literally talked to us for a minute, and I left, and literally I think it was about, and my start date was already picked out. It was going to be the next Friday, assuming background check and everything and the drug test came back in time. And so then, right before that, you get an email saying, yes, you passed your background check, you passed your drug test, your start orientation is at, I'll say, 9 o'clock on Friday. And so you go to that. And when I say 9 o'clock, I don't mean 9 in the morning, 9 o'clock at night. There's about 200 of us in a room. And literally, they split they did some things with you for a little bit, and then they literally split you into wherever you were assigned to. Had no clue what I was getting assigned to. Person next to me was assigned to gift wrap. I was sat there going, please no, please no, please no. Funny thing is, I actually managed gift wrap 20 years ago at Macy's, but
Wow.
that's a whole other story. And so then I wound up being in an area called the ship dock, which is basically where your packages leave the building. And and between that night and the next night was training, and then you were
Wow.
on to the races.
And you've been there for a little over 2 months now?
Well, over 2 months, almost. It'll be 3 months next week.
Okay, so what led me to just wanting to have this conversation, as we kind of touched on a little bit, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of talk about things that happen in Amazon fulfillment centers. You hear people discussing safety issues or hard trying to keep up with the work because it's a kind of a breakneck pace. You have metrics you have to kind of keep making sure you hit, or you get written up and things like that. There was an article that came out from the Atlantic that it was a pretty extensive thing. They
Yeah,
talked to a lot of folks on that one.
yeah, that came out November 20th, and literally that's the same week that I applied. So I actually did know it at the time, and caused me to have some concerns. You sit there going, do I really want to do this? Is this real? And so I was definitely had some concerns.
Okay.
And that is something that is, you know, to know about. I mean, you read it, any job you get, you sit there going, is this what should I be doing this?
Mm.
And, that's exactly what happened.
Okay.
And so, that's my start of my Amazon experience.
Okay. Now, fast forward to, I guess, a little earlier this month, and there is a Senate letter that was sent to, I guess, Amazon and Jeff Bezos that sort of piggybacked off of that article and started, I guess, raising questions and concerns about things that are going on in the fulfillment centers. And that seemed to spark something in you, because by that time you've had a chance to actually work for a month and a half, and gain your own personal experiences, and that led you to write this really, I thought, very interesting, very informative, gives at least your perspective, from your unique perspective of all the experiences you've had, to talk about it. And you name at the end of the article, you said, I'm proud to call myself an Amazonian. So I want to talk about the article, but before you actually go into the article, you wrote it, and you did something that you usually don't do when you write something. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, well, remember, my background was obviously Comcast, which have people really know well about, but also Citibank. And anytime you're talking banking, you're talking, conservative, careful. And so I'm used to that world. And, I never really knew what the policies were at Amazon, even though I could have looked into them, I guess, but I didn't really know what their policies were regarding social media. And to understand, you're not even allowed to bring a phone into these buildings. And we can discuss that a little further,
Mm.
because it's a policy that kind of, at first I didn't really like. And then as time went on, the light bulb went on in my mind. But, so, you know, I that article itself and the letter struck a nerve, and I felt the need to say something. So I was driving, listening to CNN. Their head of communications was on discussing this letter from these senators, and I basically said, I have something to say on this. And so I normally don't write to that, corporate offices or anything like that, or give any previews of my thoughts. But it was one that I really felt the needed to be said from me. And so I wrote to them to make sure basically I didn't want to get fired over it.
Right.
And so I wrote to them, and it was really, I wrote to Jim Carney, who actually was kind enough to forward it to some people within my business unit at corporate, who wrote back and said, no, you're absolutely allowed to. Here's things to do. Here's things to avoid. And some of the things we're to do is to basically be clear. And I'll be clear in this video. These are my views. These aren't Amazon's views. And other than that, being truthful about it. And so that's what I shared. And so, yes, I did something I don't normally do, but that's because I wasn't looking to make waves, but I felt it needed to be said, because I think oftentimes, we hear these things in the news or whatever, and the context may not be there.
Right. And what I thought was interesting when you told that to me a little earlier, that they responded to you as quickly as they did, and they didn't shut you down. They sent you the policies, and they just said, just, we want you to be aware of it, but we're okay with what your thoughts are, as long as you stay away from trade secrets and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. It was all normal stuff and nothing to, that I would be concerned about. And, and so it was good. And I really appreciate them taking the time to do that.
All right. So we kind of set the stage. So what did you want to get across? Because it
Mhm.
sounds like and we were hearing from, and in particularly, you actually wrote this article before the PBS Frontline documentary came out. It kind of had a lot of former Amazon fulfillment workers talking about it. And let's face it, I don't think I heard anything positive coming from those folks.
Well, yeah, it was really interesting because I did not know the Frontline piece was coming out or anything about it. Obviously, timing wise, is quite interesting. So I took the time to watch it last night. Found the whole entire thing to be a hit piece, which usually expect more things like that from organization like PBS to be a little bit more balanced.
Yeah.
In the areas where they were talking about the fulfillment centers, they were talking to former employees. And so I want to provide a little bit of perspective. And let's take, I mentioned it before, let's talk about the hiring practices. And I mentioned it briefly in the article. And I think it's probably more important for people to actually understand how hiring happens. They hire a lot of people and, they do so fast. There is no interviews. I did not, meet with people. I literally went in, filled out an application, came back, went through the drug screening, and then had a background check, and I was starting. Literally,
Wow.
that's how it all
So
worked.
they didn't give you any like physical endurance tests. They didn't give you strength
No, no.
tests or anything like that. Yeah.
And truthfully, you don't fully know the job you're applying for. It's not as fully clear, maybe that to them and maybe to me now that I've been there. But without being there, you choose something, you don't really know what you're choosing.
Mm.
And so I had no clue I'd be on the ship dock, which, if you're thinking about, is probably one of the more enduring type roles in that organization. And
Just so people know what that is, what exactly
ship
is that?
docks, that's filling the trucks. That's the stuff that's getting the packages that are sealed come through down conveyor belts, and we're sorting them as to where they're going. Some are going to be shipped via Amazon delivery service. Others are being shipped by USPS. Others by UPS. Some are being airmailed because some of it goes globally at this warehouse. To give you an idea of the warehouse, up to 1 million packages a day
Mm.
go through this warehouse. This is not a small warehouse.
And
Uh,
how many people are there? And how many robots, if you could give a ballpark
I
figure?
have no clue how many robots. Uh, and we should talk about that. Actually, let's get into this a little bit
Yeah.
because when I hear this discussion about the fulfillment centers, one of the things is almost all the details center from a 2010 article, and this was mentioned in the Frontline piece, a 2010 article out of Allentown, Pennsylvania. And that article, at the time, warehouses were really new. They were for Amazon, they were expanding dramatically. And did they make mistakes? From my perspective, yes. And I think they even admit that. But you know, today their warehouses are also vastly different. One of the things that used to be the case is, they would have these runners that would have to go get the merchandise, and they'd have to run. Think about it, 1 million square feet is 1.2 million square feet is Robbinsville. Imagine running that to go get the merchandise. Now let's take you to the way it really is today. You literally stand in a station, and I've not done this picking piece, but I did inventory. And
Mhm.
for inventory, it's the same thing. You literally stand in the station, and what it wants you to inventory, a robot brings it to you. And then the scanner tells you what to inventory, or if you're picking, tells you what to pick. And so, it's not that difficult of a task. There's no endurance of running all over the place. Literally, robots keep bringing stuff to you.
Wow.
And so, if you ever have the chance, Google it. They look like really big Roombas. Um, Roomba carrying a cart on top of it,
Wow.
and they keep bringing you the different things that you need to do. So when you look at that older stuff, you are looking at people that were runners. That would have been strenuous.
Mhm.
And, where the robotics has taken that strain away, it hasn't taken the job away. In fact, what people don't realize is since bringing in the robotics, Amazon has hired a lot more people. And so, these are things that are not mentioned in these things. Then you have, these former employees who are the ones making these statements. Now, I want to tell you something. As I said, you have an fairly easy hiring process.
Mhm.
You have a pulse, you're getting the job. And so, but the problem is, this may not be the job for you.
Right.
And so you're going to go into this, and I see it each and every night that I work. The people that, are off trying to chat with their friends or flirt with that girl over there or whatever, they're not doing work. Now, for me, and, I make the point in my piece is I never concentrate on my numbers. I don't even know what's considered to be a good number or a bad number. And, but I do know is they post them and I do glance at it and I know I'm typically in the top 5. Now, and that's with like, something like 100 people working, a lot of people working. And so, you know, but I'm not doing that stuff. I'm literally, you asked me to go do this job, I'm doing job. And I'm doing as much as I can because guess what? The more I do, the faster the time goes by and I get through the night. When it's slow, things aren't happening as much. The night goes by really long. And so I much rather be active doing work. And so meeting these numbers has not been difficult. And I did spend a few weeks doing, in a different area. So not ship dock, but inventory control, where I was counting things. And people came to me there. I know I was there. I was there for at least 8 nights, probably more than that. And I know at least on 3 of them, they came to me and said I was the top performer.
Uh, and
And
you're not even worried about metrics because in that documentary, one of the two takeaways I got was from the folks that were a part of that, where they said meeting the metrics was hard, and then some said meeting the metrics wasn't difficult, but it was meeting the metrics while observing and staying in regulation of the safety rules that caused them issues when they were trying to meet the metrics in a clean fashion. And
yeah,
you're saying that wasn't your experience.
yeah. So, and I'll tell you, people do what they're measured. And this is I make the point in my piece. I think their measurements aren't always the best.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you the example. I work on the ship dock, so we're scanning boxes, and people want to get the scans in. Well, there are other facets to the job that are not necessarily measured by those scans, and you do need to do them, such as every 3 feet you need to wrap the pallet so it doesn't fall on someone as you're filling them. And and so there are other tasks that you need to do. My observation has been, and I have shared this with leadership at Amazon, is people aren't necessarily doing those. They're not doing them because they want to hit these numbers. To me, that I debunk that because I meet the numbers and I do it. It's not hard to do it. The problem to it is, and the frustration is when you're the only one doing it and there's other people there and they're not doing it, then you kind of get a little frustrated that, I'm the one doing, everybody should be doing this.
Right.
And I know why they're not doing it because they want more numbers. That's on them. And I think that, there needs to be a different way to measure some of those things. I also think that there's ways to measure getting things out to customers in a timely fashion, scanning things properly so they're actually measured. I think there's a number of other measurements that could be put in place. Like in general, they don't assign us to what lane you're on. So people jump to the lane where they think they can get the most scans in. And which becomes a problem because then they ignore other ones. And so I think there's ways to manage this a little differently. But that being said, it's not hard to do the job and get the number and be safe. I try and be safe in everything I do. And, I do make sure to wrap the pallets now, and other things such as, not leaving an empty pallet on the ground so someone trips over it. Common way of getting hurt and actually very much hurt in an environment like this. And so, you have to make sure you do those things. I do them. I have seen others not do them, and I've seen them called out for it. So, I actually do think management does try and keep you concentrated on being safe. I think
Well,
it's
you actually mentioned in your post too that it seems like every time you go into a shift, you have like a meeting at the beginning, and they even go over like tips and tricks for
quality tips.
safety, and talk about the stretching thing too.
If you ever saw the movie Gung Ho, where they're out in the field doing these exercises. Now, we're not doing jumping jacks like they did in the movie, but they actually have for pretty much every job different stretches that actually go with the type of job you have. So on the ship dock, we have these huddles, and I didn't say it in the article. We actually have them twice a day, once at when you start, and then once at after lunch, which is 11:45 to 12:15. We'll call it lunch. Night. But anyway, when we come back, and what you do is they go over these tips. While they're going over these tips, there's someone like myself who is leading the pack. I've sought to never have to lead the pack in these exercises. And some are silly. They're like moving your hands in a certain way. But there's other stretches that are other parts of your body. And they have two different versions of it, one that's done at 6 and one that's done in the middle of the night. And it's because these are the muscles that you're using. So it's actually well thought out and tested. They are trying to keep you that way. The other thing is they actually do encourage you to do it throughout your shift. And in some areas, not my department yet, but in some areas, they even have it where now the device you use to scan to do your work is actually telling you, you know what, stop, take a moment and do this stretch. It's telling you a stretch to do. And so they're doing that to change up that monotony, but also for your body. And, this is something that's quite interesting. Seeing everybody doing these exercises does give you that gung ho reminder. And it's a little weird. And I also thought some of the stretches were really strange when I did them, like twirling my hands a certain way or whatever. But they do also encourage you not only to do it then, but if you ever feel like a tightness or anything, you should stop what you're doing and do it during the shift. And you know what? I have. And even when we're busy, especially when you're busy is when you tend to feel it because you're moving a little faster than you normally do. And you're going, oh, and so you step back, you do that, loosens things up, and you get back to it. And so they actually do encourage that. And you never hear these things in any of these things. It's always these employees that are no longer there. And I'm not saying that, that people, that Amazon's perfect. I believe that, they have some managers I've seen that could use some coaching, so I'm sure there's some managers that overemphasize in different ways. I say in my piece, I've seen some managers that are very big on the stick instead of the carrot.
Mm-hmm.
A few and far between, but they're there. And so I do think that, some people may have had bad managers or even maybe a bad leader of a thing. But I can't speak to what it was, but I can say over the 2 months that I've been there, to me, it's not been overemphasis on productivity as opposed to safety. And in fact, one of the things that happens is when you get your scanner, and it does this at lunch as well as at the start of your shift, it always asks you a question. And the question oftentimes is, in busy times, is your manager more focused on productivity or safety?
Really?
Yeah.
Do
And
you?
that's one example. There's tons of them.
But do you get a sense that as each of employees take these quick survey questions, that they actually are acting on the feedback that they're getting from it?
I've spoken to the managers, and yes, they do, and they get feedback on it. So, and if you think about it, Amazon does have a history of being a very metric-driven,
Right.
company. I know people at their corporate office, and they've told me this. And so, what I will tell you though is managers have these metrics based upon these surveys. So yes, do they act on it? Absolutely. The other piece to it is, and this happened to me once, but every area has an area manager that's responsible for the whole entire area. It could be a lot of people that they're managing, but they have to once a week also pull together a grouping of, I don't know how many associates, but a number of associates, and actually talk to them and ask them about safety. And it's really interesting because you get feedback on that, and I saw immediate changes on some things that I discussed, and they were kind of silly stuff that I was like, oh, if we did this a little bit better, we would fix this, and literally change that night.
Wow.
And so, and the other piece to it is you see managers walking around, and it's really funny. They're not at least my management team is not micromanaging people. They're micromanaging a lot, coming down and dealing with that, but not like, on top of you all the time. But, one of the things I have noticed when they're walking around, they're picking up trash. If a pallet is not properly, is there empty, that we put stuff on them so that so you can easily see them. And so they'll find a cone and get a cone on it, or they'll move it and get it off. And it's not like they even ask someone to do it. They literally do it themselves.
Is that somebody trying to? Is that on your end or mine? I can't see.
It's on your end. I should not be on my end.
I don't even know who's trying to contact me, but hopefully they'll go away.
Sorry about that. That was on my end.
Oh, okay.
That's
all right. Just want to make sure. I was trying to figure out what's going on. Let me ask you.
I'm in a place I normally don't have my mail set up, and I think it was Google is sending me a call.
That's all right. Hey, let me ask you. Give me your sense of how the employees, what's their impression, what are their thoughts on the robots assisting? It seems like, there's a certain, kind of thought that says, the automation or robotics are taking jobs. And then there's the folks that are saying, they may take certain jobs, but the net is more jobs will get created. What is the perception from the employee standpoint in the fulfillment center around the robots?
It's a fantastic question. What I would say from an employee, I think you see the same thing you see in the world. You see a mix. You see people that are like, oh, they're going to take our jobs. And then there's another aspect, which is, as Amazon has brought in these robots, they've actually hired more people. And that's statistically, something anyone can look into, but their fulfillment centers have grown with these robots over these years. And so, and the jobs are just different than they were then. And so, I personally think that there's going to be, there's some jobs that may go away. There's other jobs that are going to happen, in place of them. So for me, that's the case. For people that have been there as more robots came in, they're more acknowledging that, oh, you know what, they did hire more people. Whereas a newer employee might be like, see that, because we have like some big, huge robots that do cool things. They're like, oh, they're replacing us with that. I think that, and then you can say, well, you do the math on that. Probably not. And so, you see a mixture. But at the same time, most people are like, let's just have fun now and do what we need to do.
Yeah.
And so I don't see a negative towards the robots. In fact, most of the time, the reaction's more like, cool, especially the first time they see it, carrying these big yellow things. And oh, that's what happens, especially people like my area, the ship dock, which is, there is some robotic stuff, and there's conveyor belts that do different things, automated. And so, but then when we go into these other areas, and sometimes it's the first time, you're like, oh, that's pretty neat. You never get to see it otherwise because you're always in the loading dock.
Well, you saw the PBS thing. What was the thing that really you felt they got wrong the most?
I think there's a lot of things they got wrong the most because, I'm an early adopter. I've had the Amazon Echo from the first week it came out. I have the Amazon Echo Auto, and I've had that fairly early on. I think that there's a number of things. I think they tried to over dramatize the fear, especially, oh, they're listening in. There's an overemphasis on older like former employees. The one guy who was the chief technology officer, I think he was employee number one. He came across to me as someone who really missed out on some stock options and was really upset. And I don't know if that's true. I'm giving you my take on what it was. He's probably a good guy, but it lost credibility because it wasn't balanced in its approach. I think too often what they're missing, like in the fulfillment centers, is the amount Amazon has hired over the past 10 years, and the people that they hired. I work with a wide range of people. I made this point in the post too, which is people are just coming out of homelessness because they're now making enough money that they can actually afford a place to live.
And have benefits too, like health benefits, right?
Exactly. I think that's tremendous. Then there's people like myself who are doing it for a totally different reason. But you know what? These are good. The wage that they're paying, they mention it, and they only mention it as a Amazon statement said. But it really shouldn't be Amazon statement said. It should be, we should see more companies paying $15 an hour at minimum, and sometimes higher in other places. It shouldn't be the company statement doing that. They should have done that. That should have been emphasized, because we need more companies paying above minimum wage, and starting to change that dynamic. And so Amazon led the way with that. And so I think that there's a lot of aspects that could be said differently. And I'm not going to sit, as I said, it's not a perfect company. They're not perfect managers all over the place. People are going to have negative experiences. People can go, I'm sure there's some people in my warehouse that may feel differently than I do. Ultimately, there's a balance to all of this. Most of the people I interact with are perfectly happy. And there's camaraderie working nights, especially weekend nights, because we all, everybody seems to have a very similar schedule, so you see them every week. And so, I think that's another piece to it. There are other stories out there, and I think they're positive stories. They're positive societal stories. I also think that there's positive societal stories about technology and different technologies, such as the Amazon Echo, that makes it easier to do things. And, that is something that I think needs to be emphasized. Do we have to have conversations about things like privacy and all that? Yes. But it should be mixed with what is the balance of what we're getting. And the other piece to it is, I know they wanted to try and emphasize that, like the Echo's listening when that's not true. And that's been, when they have had issues, they fix that. It's not there all the time. It's listening for that keyword, and that's when it starts, and that's what triggers it. But instead it plays into the fear that people have that may not be willing to have this in their thing. We have to stop playing into people's fear and start bringing a more positive aspect about society. No wonder everybody's fighting with each other, over stupid things. We don't have a positive outlook. There are a lot of positives going on. There's tons of positives at Amazon. And why aren't we talking about those? Why aren't we talking about the health benefits that truthfully are cheaper than when I was at Citibank? That to me is amazing. I was paying thousands of dollars a month at Citibank. I'm not paying that at Amazon. And so, these are the things that I think we're missing in society. And I think it's easier to go find that negative and put that negative out there. And people seem to get excited about that negative. You know what? Let's find some positives out there. There's great things that are happening in the world. And if we need to have conversations on things that may not be as positive, make it a true conversation and balanced. Bring both sides to that story, so people can see it.
Yeah, one thing I was surprised, and I pointed it out. The one of the voices that was missing in the call in that documentary was the voice of the customer. You didn't hear anything directly from the customer, which I thought was kind of interesting.
I thought there was a point where they tried to make fun of it. They did a montage of the different people from Amazon that talked about the customer in like a positive light, and like think like customer. It was a montage that, in my view, was kind of making fun of them for doing that.
Yeah.
You know what? It is what we talk about. Even at my level, I could tell you Christmas time, there was people that are working on the ship dock, not managers, who are like, let's get out there because we're going to get these to them before Christmas. Today's the 23rd. We still have a shot. Let's get it all out there. And that is, think about that. That is odd that you wouldn't think to hear from someone moving packages on a in a warehouse. But I could tell you, I know exactly who it was. I can even point them out if the fact is that is the attitude. And that is a good attitude. That's why Amazon has the reputation it has, because it's how they typically thought about things. And so don't make fun of it. Talk to a customer and see how they truly feel when they get surprised that package comes that same day. And I think that is what gave Amazon the reputation it has.
All right, let me just kind of wrap up. This has been great. We could talk about this all day, but I know you got things to do. It's like get some sleep before your next shift at Amazon. But so you're 2+ months into this. How has your perspective on Amazon changed over the 2 months that you've been working there?
My perspective actually is really interesting. I've realized something, and it's just over the past few weeks before this article. And so I end this article where I talk about this, which is, for the past, since I left Comcast, I basically been in senior management roles or consulting where I'm working usually with the C-suite. And one of the things I've realized is I have so much fun with the newer employee, that person who they're fresh, they may not know what to do, they may be doing the wrong things. I love those employees. I love being in call centers where I was dealing with those employees. And I've always worked to be an employee advocate. I've always worked to be a customer advocate. And so one of the things I've been pondering is potentially going into management at the fulfillment center. Never thought about it as my career path at all. And over the past week, especially as I think about these employees and the opportunity to do things, differently or get them to see a different perspective, I'm seriously considering, going that direction. And so, it's something that is on my mind. And it's because how often do we not have fun at work? I haven't had fun at work in years. To me, it's not fun. It's a drag. I need to, get things done. Whereas, and a place like Citibank, and you're at the senior leader position, it's truthfully a dog eat dog world. And I'm not into that. I don't want to destroy someone else for me to be better. It doesn't make me feel good. And so I much rather do what's right for the customer, do the thing that's right. And so, with all that perspective, I am really considering that as potentially my next career path move. I'm not 100% certain because that's a big income drop. But it's something that I think could be of value and make me feel good about going to work each day. If you go to work each day and you're helping some employee better themselves. One of the things, actually, just to point out another benefit that Amazon has, they actually have a benefit, which I haven't taken advantage of and maybe should, but where you could actually get trained to be anything else besides the warehouse employee. Wow. So you want to become a nurse, they'll pay for it. And
that was the one thing they did point out in the document.
They did point it out, but I thought it was also extraordinarily brief.
It was like an afterthought almost. It's like, oh, by the way, they'll pick up 95% of the cost. But then they moved on to
and it's all about bettering yourself and also society. There has to be they want you to have, there needs to be some societal benefit, so the job can't be something that's really not going to add that value. But the example they use is a nurse, and I think that's a great example. And so one of the things with working with these type of employees is it's basically, and I think the guy does say, be here for 2 years while you're doing that, and then you're going, great.
Right. He did say that. That was a great point. But like you said, they kind of glossed over it.
Yeah. And so, but that to me would be a fun piece of management, because you're helping not only do well in their career at that moment in this place that may not fit their longer term plans, but then you can also have the ability to help those longer term plans. How many companies have, we have education reimbursement, but it needs to fit, working here in the role you're in or whatever. And it's like, Amazon does the exact opposite. It can't fit. It's not about fitting the role you're in. It's about fitting society. That to me is a big difference. That's a culture difference. And there's a number of culture aspects that I do love about Amazon. And that is definitely one of them. But it's how do I help someone really take value in that? And while they're at Amazon, be the best Amazon employee they can be. And I think that there's definitely potential there. So, I'm having some conversations of trying to figure out if that's what I want to do. And, so more to come on that. But it's definitely in my mind.
One last thing I thought about as you were talking about that, which was brought up by the kind of the disgruntled group there, the part about feeling like they're being watched and they have to scan all the time. What's your personal perspective and kind of give us the lay of the land over there?
First of all, they must think that people have tons of time to be sitting there staring at these cameras all the time. It's kind of like the same thought I have with people that think the Amazon Echo is listening to them all the time and people are listening to everything you say. Who has the interest or the time? Yeah. So yes, they do have cameras all over the place, and the cameras are more useful after the fact. If an accident happened, why did it happen? Or if there is theft. And one of the things that will surprise you. Now, there's high security at these facilities. You have to go through metal detectors and and there's a lot online on that. And truthfully, I found a really cool belt that doesn't set off a metal detector ever. It's made with a 3D printer. But anyway, it's now my favorite belt and I wear it all the time. But because one of my goals is never to set off the metal detector. Although gum set off the metal detector, it's kind of a nuisance sometimes. But what you don't realize is all that merchandise, including some of the most expensive merchandise, is not sitting locked up somewhere. It's on these robots. They come up to you. I can have a robot come up to me with tons of just clothing, dog food, and all kinds of other stuff. But I can have one come up that has all the best electronics I've ever seen, and you can't. That's how it works. And so when I originally really didn't like the metal detectors, they've grown on me because I've seen how open it is with all that. And I think that that's something and it's one of those things in how you talk to employees about why do we have this, metal detectors, or why do we have the cameras? What do we do with those? And I think it's helping people see that there is business needs for these things. And we don't pay 1,000 people to watch the 1,000 people that are here all the time. It just doesn't work.
Right.
And I think those are the things to keep in mind. And so, yes, do they have cameras? Yes, and they're in pretty much any place where there is. I shouldn't say any place. I think there's probably places like in the ship dock that are not as clear cut with the cameras, but like in the place where you're picking the open merchandise that's out, every one of those stations, there's cameras.
Right.
And if they really want to watch me the whole time, go right ahead. It's pretty boring. I know when I was doing the inventory and say a robot wasn't coming, it would tell you a robot's coming in like 60 seconds, and say a robot wasn't coming for a few moments. I might be like stretching, or I like to, it's such a big place. If I'm on an upper floor, I like to walk over to the edge so I can peek over and see the whole entire 1.2 million square feet. Especially if I'm on the fourth floor, it gives a really neat view of these conveyor systems that's above everybody that you don't see normally. And you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. I wish they'd let me bring my phone in so I could get this photo because it's a really cool shot.
That's why they don't let the phones in, I'm guessing.
No, they don't let them in because they sell the same phone. And I have actually gotten my same phone in inventory and went, that's actually one of the things that was that aha moment. Because one time I did bring in my phone and it was caused a whole rigmarole. It was just force of habit.
Right.
And, and so, and at that time I'm like, why are they doing this? This is ridiculous. Well, pretty much found my same phone during inventory and went, oh,
wow. Okay.
I get it now.
Right.
And no, I wasn't taking a phone. I have a crack on my screen. But so I kind of get it, and so I don't even think it's about the pictures, because even in their policies they talk about taking pictures and being careful of not taking where the customer information is or something like that.
Right,
But
right,
most
right.
of the other stuff they're actually fairly open about. But of course, you can't bring your phone in to take the picture. So it's kind of just a comical aspect of the policies.
Man, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking time, and I enjoyed the article. I always enjoy when we get a chance to talk, which is rare these days. But I'm glad we are able to do it. And hey, man, yeah, it sounds like you're still proud to be an Amazonian at this point.
I definitely am, and I think it's been fun. And I actually do look forward to going into work most days.
All right, there it
It's
is.
not good enough rest ahead of time, switching day night.
I was gonna say most nights, most.
There is sometimes a problem. I always try and take a nap before I go in Friday because I'm switching back to nights. So I block out time in the afternoon to take a nap. If I don't get much sleep, I may not want to go in.
Yeah.
But other than that, I typically like going in. Oh,
Well, we're going to
my
let you
kid
get
has
some sleep.
lacrosse, and I sleep in the parking lot. I've done that more than
Well, we want to let you get some sleep now while you're like not in the parking lot in the car. So hey, I totally appreciate it. Thanks again for doing this, man. It's really been great.
anytime. I enjoy it.
All right, take care.